Ever since I started working for Tennis Channel, a lot of my tennis viewing habits have been altered. And last week is a good example because the week after the US Open, that is generally a week where I am on vacation. I am off that week. I do an interview with Steve Flink. I do a mailbag a lot of the time, but I do not watch tennis that week. I'm done with that for that week, and then I'll turn back on. But last week, I was hosting Tennis Channel's coverage of Nur Sultan, a tournament in Kazakhstan, which means I was up from 10 p.m. Pacific time to 7 a.m. Pacific time, completely nocturnal, watching Nur Sultan. Not looking for any pity there. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but that's what I was doing. And when you're up and you're watching those kinds of events, you remember that magical things happen during these 250 weeks. And players who end up making a lot of noise later on in bigger tournaments, this is where they make their push. So with that in mind, I wanted to shed light on three players who are red hot right now, playing awesome tennis, but are outside of the top 50. You can't get on this list unless you're outside of the top 50. Let's get into it after a quick word from our sponsor, Rally Tennis. Rally Tennis is a new mobile app that makes it easy to play tennis in your area, whether you want to compete or just train. Creating an account is free. Just head over to rallytennis.com or search for Rally Tennis in the App Store. And if you sign up and use me as the referrer, you'll also get $10 towards your account. The three hottest players outside the top 50 on the ATP Tour right now, that starts with James Duckworth. James Duckworth is not only playing incredible tennis right now, but has an unbelievable story. He has had 8 surgeries in his career, all from a span of 2012 to 2018. Then he had another surgery during the pandemic, which I'll get to repeat in a moment. But basically, he was completely out of commission 2017. All of his surgeries have pretty much been in his right shoulder, his right elbow, or his foot. I forget if it's his right foot or his left foot, but his foot. Now, 2017, he barely played at all. In 2018, he used his protected ranking and got to play in a couple of draws, and he kept getting the worst draws in the world. Every time he uses his protected ranking, of course, a player like that is going to try to play the majors, most opportunity with prize money and rankings points. And he plays Nadal, he plays Federer, he plays Murray, he plays Zverev. He cannot get a good draw for the life of him. And that sets up for a pretty brutal 2019. 2018, he didn't really win any matches. I think he won maybe one match on the main draw of the ATP, and part of that is because he kept drawing top 10 players in the world every time he used his protected ranking to get into a draw. So 2019 was brutal. He had an god-awful ranking. He was outside the top 500, and he had to grind on the Challenger Tour. So in 2019, nobody really, who doesn't follow the Challenger Tour, nobody saw the name James Duckworth, but he went 49-18 and won 4 titles. Now he's got a ranking again, but he still wasn't quite right. 2020, the pandemic hits. He's still playing through pain in his shoulder, and it's finally time to try to fix this once and for all. And he is convinced by none other than Pat Rafter to get the damn shoulder surgery that's going to fix him up. And Rafter says, look, dude, do this surgery. Of course, a fellow Australian. Do this surgery. Get the shoulder right. This is my surgeon. Let him do it. He'll fix you up. And he got the surgery. For a lot of 2020, James said he still wasn't really right. But 2021, he has arrived. He is pain-free James Duckworth. And pain-free James Duckworth is pretty incredible to watch. Pretty unbelievable. He's now pain-free. For his height, he's got an unbelievable serve. He's got a really good serve. He has a very aggressive flat backhand. He has an excellent slice. He has a very unorthodox technique on his forehand, but he can hit it he hits good approach shots. I don't think he's great from the back of the court on the forehand side, but he's good at taking time away and hitting an approach shot. But that brings me to the next point. He comes forward. He is a really good volleyer. Good slice, awesome backhand, great volleyer, really good serve for his height. I'd say those are the attributes of James Duckworth. He's not the best athlete. His technique is funky. It is weird. Doesn't have the best forehand in the world, but he is going to put the pressure on. He is going to come forward. And first of all, that is obviously, you can probably tell from that skill set, he's going to be pretty good at Wimbledon. And he had his best result at a major, Wimbledon round 3. But ever since then, James Duckworth has continued to be red hot. He beat Fritz and Sinner, made the round of 16 in Canada, ran into some bad luck, lost a couple of matches from match point up at Winston-Salem in the U.S. Open. But then he went down to the challenger level, second week of the U.S. Open, won the Istanbul Challenger, and made the final of Nur Sultan. Watching him in Nur Sultan was fascinating and he won his first round match in Sofia this week. If anyone watched Nur Sultan, they know that this was the slowest court. This is the slowest indoor hard court I have ever seen. It was actually fascinating to watch. Now, I kind of felt bad for the players because the matches were so long. The rallies were so long. And it was physically very, very grueling because this court was so damn slow. And it was basically impossible to hit a winner from the baseline. The only player who was actually able to hit winners and hit through this court was kind of James Duckworth. Avashka to a certain extent, but James Duckworth was the guy who could do it. The main way he was doing that was he was coming forward and finishing at the net. And that was kind of giving him the offensive edge over every other player who was staying back and trying to hit through the court with their ground strokes and simply couldn't do it. Duckworth moved forward, finished at the net. His serve was actually good enough to kind of do it in a lot of respects. And his backhand was so damn hard and flat that his backhand also would sometimes find its way through that molasses slow Nur Sultan hard court. I think his game is beautiful for grass. James Duckworth, red hot, number 3 on this list. And I can tell you right now, likely going to be a dark horse for me at Wimbledon. Likely. I can say it right now. That brings us to the next player on this list. And by the way, I will not have as much to say about most players as much as I had to say about James Duckworth. Next player on the list, number 2, is Peter Geyavczek. Yes, Peter Geyavczek of Germany. He has a career high of 39, reached that in 2018, but right now sits outside the top 50. He also won Mets in 2017, so he is a title winner on the ATP Tour, as is the other player on this list. But Geyavczek has won 11 of his last 13 matches. Had his best ever result at a major, making the round of 16 at the U.S. Open, falling to Carlos Alcaraz in 5 sets. But Geyavczek is a guy who is going to thrive on indoor hard courts and has an unbelievably interesting game because unlike a lot of the flattest hitters on tour, take Gilles Simon, take Adrian Mannarino, take to some extent the best version of this group of players, Daniil Medvedev, most of the players who hit super duper duper flat actually aren't the most aggressive players. And I know that's weird, and I don't really know why that is. It's kind of a strange dichotomy because you'd think when you flatten a ball out, you're generally hitting more aggressively. But most of the players who hit absolutely zero topspin, such as Medvedev, Mannarino, Gilles Simon, they actually aren't very aggressive. But Geyavczek actually breaks this trend. His ground strokes are absolute lasers. Lasers. There is zero shape on them whatsoever. And he hits them really, really hard. And I think he's got incredible racket talent for him to be as consistent as he is, to hit with absolutely zero net clearance, but to actually kind of ramp up the velocity on those and not just hit with depth and consistency and kind of rely on the flatness of the stroke and the depth, because normally if you flatten the ball out, it's not going to land before the service line. So a lot of these players hit with good depth, good consistency, but they don't really accelerate. They don't hit the ball very hard. Geyavczek actually kind of slaughters the ball and hits it really flat and with not a lot of net clearance. And that's a very deadly combination. He's got a really great inside-out forehand over the lowest part of the net. His backhand and his forehand are equally aggressive. That makes him very dangerous. I don't really love his serve, and I don't think he's the most athletic guy, and I don't think that he plays great defense, and that is why he is not a player who is going to be top 10, but I would hate to play him because right now he is a dude whose ground strokes are absolutely punishing, absolutely ferociously damaging, that Geyavczek is red hot here. And by the way, he's qualified for 3 straight tournaments: Atlanta, US Open, Mets. Dude's red hot. So Peter Geyavczek, shout out to him. Currently number 87 in the world, but he's going to get his ranking up high. I think he's going to have a monster fall here. So shout out to Geyavczek. Lastly, number 3 on this list, the thing about this player is that, yes, he's red hot, but he's been hot for a really long time now. So he's kind of, I don't know, in a separate category. Ilya Avashka. Shout out to Ilya Avashka. Avashka, here's his story. He ended 2020 with 2 challenger titles. Sandwiched in between there was a loss in the semifinal to Sebastian Korda. No shame in that. But 2 challenger titles. Istanbul he won, and Ortiz he won. Something about me. I don't really watch challengers much, but I follow them very carefully. But I don't watch them. So that's why I don't pronounce a lot of the challenger sites very well. And again, I keep an eye on them because it's very important to understand. Like, for example, honorable mention for this video, Benjamin Bonzi. Benjamin Bonzi keeps winning challenger titles. That's something to notice because when he starts to play tour level events, that's someone I'm gonna keep my eye on. I'm gonna watch. Benjamin Bonzi has been tearing it up. Anyway, so Avashka wins 2 challengers at the tail end of 2020, and those points allow him to start this season on the main tour, and that is pretty much where he's played the entirety of 2021, with the exception of one tournament, one match he lost first round. But he's pretty much been on the main tour, playing a lot of qualifying, but playing also a lot of ATP main draws. And he has absolutely torn it up. His overall record in 2021 is 41 wins and 18 losses. His record in ATP main draws is 29 wins and 14 losses. That's in main draws. Unbelievable. Incredible. Now, before the US Open, the reason he lands on this list is he is red hot. Because right before the US Open, he won his first career title in Winston-Salem. Then he went to New York, and he lost that 5-setter to Matteo Berrettini. Almost took him out. Was very, very close. Almost made it happen. Didn't. Then he came to Nur Sultan, lost to a man on this list, James Duckworth, in the semifinal. But I have to say, I was very impressed with Avashka's quarterfinal win over Emil Rusevori in Nur Sultan, because the conditions were horrible for Avashka in Nur Sultan. Avashka wants to, first of all, get a lot out of his serve. His serve is massive. Really, really big. And then he wants to hit and finish players from the baseline. He can come forward, but he's not like a net rusher like James Duckworth. But he really wants to finish points and be aggressive. Nur Sultan was kind of one for the grinders. The grinders were going to play best at Nur Sultan to a certain extent. So the conditions were really bad. They kind of favored Rusevori in that match. But Avashka, whose weapons are large enough to generally finish points really quickly, his weapons really weren't working. And against Rusevori, I saw that Avashka will suffer. He's willing to suffer. I love that. That was a heart win. And also a win that showed his physicality, because he's in incredible shape. He moves really well, but the power, the strength that he brings to the court, how stable he is moving side to side, but really just the power when he's on the run. Of course, it comes out in how big he hits his serve, how big he hits his backhand. dude puts in the work. He is extremely, extremely fit, very strong, doesn't get tired very easily. That's why he's played so many matches. And, man, I think he kind of reminds me of Aslan Karatsev, but he's even more physical. He reminds me of Karatsev because he takes the ball extremely early. He takes a lot of time away. And once he does that, he's very deadly when it comes to going down the line often and just kind of, especially using his backhand, which is as comfortable of an attacking weapon, if not a more comfortable attacking weapon as his forehand. Loves going down the line with it. Doesn't really hit the angles that Karatsev does, but it's all about suffocating you, taking time away, hitting big on every single ball, being strong and physical and powerful, and really, I think he serves bigger than Karatsev, but also he reminds me of Karatsev because he's 27 years old and playing the best tennis of his career. Karatsev is an interesting guy to talk about. Maybe I'll talk about him at some point, but he's kind of fallen off. It's mostly a confidence thing. He did not win Nur-Sultan. He lost first round. So that's the list. 3 hottest players outside the top 50. James Duckworth, Peter Geyavczek, and Ilya Avashka. Did you like this video? Do you want to see more of this? Let me know. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.